Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with season 14, episode 1 of our weekly-ish Q&A videos. We had a hiatus of a few
lot of
weeks.
reasons. Yeah, a lot of reasons. So this is a new season.
Yeah.
And we start a new season often when we've got something new to start. And this time it's more because we took a bit of a break. And I don't know that we've identified what the season is going to be. We didn't do that for a while until
recently,
very recently, last couple of years.
Yeah, so we'll talk briefly, or we'll talk briefly about the team, and then we'll talk a little bit about the hiatus because I think there's also some fun stuff to talk about for what we were doing. We're out living life, you know,
living large, baby.
Yeah.
So even though it's not a new even though it is a new season, we don't have a new identity yet. This is a carryover from last season where we're using the characters that we expect to come in the upcoming challenge. Mm-hmm. And that's Blackest Night Batman. He's got Tentu Totem, Master's Death Cart, and the Claw of Horus. And while he is very good on a Blackest Night team, he will make the Blackest Night team better. And he is better because of Blackest Night Hawkgirl, because it gives him a revive. He's actually even better on this Hawkgirl Rebirth Raven team. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me as I was recording some of this footage that when we have this kind of loadout, it's not just a demonstration of how good Blackest Night Batman can be when we make him the primary damage dealer, but it might be an even better demonstration of how good Hawkgirl Prime and Rebirth Raven are when they are better teammates than using a single universe team that has pretty decent synergy. But we're not just making the team better, we're making Blackest Night Batman better. Mm-hmm. Right? So Batman is a star, and so he's interesting. His passive is Surging Darkness. Batman deals more damage as his opponent's health depletes. Blackest Night characters receive an additional 10% unblockable chance for each Blackest Night member on their team. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who've been playing for a while, I don't know if you might remember that Blackest Night Batman's passive, when he was the only Blackest Night character, his passive used to be that he would do, I think, 20% more damage after midnight.
Yeah.
What a weird. Sure.
And not that good.
Right.
20% isn't enough to matter. If he did like 200% more damage after midnight, that would be like significant.
So instead of after midnight, it's as his opponent's health depletes, which I like. I think that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And the second part they added was that the unblockable chance made him really, really good. So not only does that make him better, but he makes a Blackest Night team better. Mm-hmm. And despite that, it is, again, Hawkgirl and Rebirth Raven who is really making him a star. So anyways, it's an interesting, I don't know why it didn't occur to me before. I mean, I've always said that Hawkgirl Prime and Rebirth Raven are both S-tier characters.
Yeah.
But it's, every once in a while I just realize, there's a reason why they're so good.
Yeah. So there we go. So that's the team that we're looking at. And do you want to talk a little bit about our hiatus? Because we did a couple cool things, I think.
Yeah. So I don't go to a lot of conventions.
Yeah.
But the one convention that I still love going to is Scintillation, which happens in Montreal. It's a small convention. Mm-hmm. It's not only run by an award-winning author, Joe Walton, it is also attended by
quite a few really talented, interesting people in lots of different domains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so somebody, I can't remember who was saying it, but somebody was sort of joking that the concentration, the ratio of Hugo Awards to attendees at that one particular function was higher than any other convention that they've
ever been to.
Yeah, ever been to.
Which makes sense. For people who don't know, the Hugo is, I believe, like the biggest, the most prestigious fantasy sci-fi.
It's definitely among the most prestigious. But what's interesting to me is that before I learned more about the industry, I didn't realize that it's prominent because it's been around a long time. And it's pretty famous and it's popular, but it's decided by the membership of the Worldcon each year.
Yeah.
So they vote on it. So it's really a fan award. Mm-hmm. So I'll say there's 3 equally prominent in different ways awards. There's a Nebula Award which is awarded by the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America.
Yeah.
Or I think they might have changed it to mean Science Fiction Fantasy Writers Association, just to keep the same letters but make it more inclusive.
Yeah.
And that's voted on by writers who are members, and in order to become a member, you have to meet certain minimum qualifications for sales.
Mm-hmm.
And or I guess there's some people who have been around long enough they're grandfathered in. And then the World Fantasy Award, which is decided completely differently, it's a juried award, so that there's a number of writers or people who maybe they're not writers. They're just people who get to decide. They read they shortlist a bunch of books, they read all the books, and then they decide who wrote or who gets the award for each of the categories.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me, right?
Because there's 3? What's the third?
World Fantasy Award, Nebula Award, and Hugo.
Oh, okay. So World Fantasy Award is the World Fantasy Convention?
Correct.
And then the Hugo is
WorldCon.
WorldCon, okay.
And Nebula is the Writers Association.
Yeah.
So, anyways, one of the attendees was Naomi Kritzer, who won 2 Hugos last year, which was kind of neat. And what I like about the convention is, I mean, I haven't gone to a lot of big ones, but what I like about the convention is that it really sort of bucks the typical convention experience where, I mean, what I hear about is like going to Comic-Con where you can pay thousands of dollars or hundreds or thousands of dollars for a big VIP fan experience. All right, so Facebook showed me this ad.
But they often are much more sort of notable or popular people for the fan experience.
Sure.
Like, so for example, I have a friend who got a picture with Neil Newbon, who is the voiced Astarion in Baldur's Gate 3. And so he is, when we're talking about the order of magnitude of like sales of like a super, super well, like successful video game. I was going to say like well-performing video game, right? Versus like an author of a book, right? There's a lot of people who have heard and developed some sort of relationship with a character that he has played, as opposed to a much smaller subset of people who have, potentially developed a stronger relationship with an author, right? Because they've made like, sort of the whole world more holistically. But, there's a difference in sort of volume of demand, I think.
Oh, the audience size, we're talking orders of magnitude, right? Like when you talk about how the Comic-Con has become more of a media event than a comic book event. Yeah. That you're looking at... So here's the example I was going to give. That Facebook gave me an ad for, I think it's Toronto Comic-Con or Fan Expo or one of those coming up in Toronto.
Probably Fan Expo if it's coming up.
Okay. Jim Lee is an artist, very popular in the 90s, still popular now, big name. They're selling 3 different fan experiences. One was for $200.
Yeah. It's a lot of money.
3 autographs on items of your choosing with his chance to veto if he just doesn't want to sign it.
Yeah, like if he's signing some body parts or something.
Some exclusive print.
Yeah.
Guaranteed seating at one of his panels. And you get to take a selfie with him. $200.
That's a lot of money.
For $1,500, you can get 4 autographs.
One extra autograph.
Seating,
okay.
And I think you get a pre-made sketch. It's like, I don't know, like 5 by 6 inches, but it's a side sketch. So the quality of it is not really super polished. Like, clearly he's talented, but it's not going to be like a really... And it's side profile bust type of sketch. And then there's another one that's like 2,000 something where he sketches it in front of you. Yeah. And I mean, that's a lot of money. And it's sort of the opposite of the experience of going to Scintillation, where you just get to hang out with people. Like, they're on panels, you talk to them, you can talk to them before, you can talk to them after. A lot of times they're in the audience listening to other people's panels. Yeah. They might be sitting in the common areas just chatting with people.
Yeah, and they're also all exceptionally friendly. So like Gretchen McCulloch, for example, this is a good example when we're talking about the difference in experience.
So she wrote
Because Internet. She's an internet linguist. She's a writer. She did some writing for Tom Scott's second set of linguistics videos. Right. She has a podcast called Lingthusiasm. Just all around cool person. But she had a panel where she was talking, for whatever reason, about Kiki and Booba, which are the 2... You know about Kiki and Booba, yeah?
Well, I know now. I didn't know
Do you know what they are, or no?
They're genders in a world unraveled.
So that's not what they are. Kiki and Booba are a linguist term. So there's something called a Kiki and a Booba, right? It was essentially, there was an experiment that they did where they said, here are two figures, two shapes that you've never seen before. One of them is Kiki and one of them is Booba. Which one is which? And so
okay, now that sounds
Booba
familiar. Okay.
has these rounded edges, right? It's just sort of a blob.
Yes.
And Kiki has sharp edges. And I say Booba and Kiki, which one's which one. The experiment was actually for people to label them, because what they found was that across cultures, that people would label Kiki as the sharp one and Booba as the rounded one. And, it makes intuitive sense to most people, but it's a relatively important discovery, I think, because there's a lot of stuff. It ends up being really hard to prove where our ideas for stuff comes from, right? Whether it's cultural, whether it's cross-cultural, and there are very few things that are truly universally cross-cultural, right? And so the idea that, there's a huge amount of agreement between people that Kiki, the stuff where there's physically sort of more of a sharp feeling to the words, right? Versus Booba, which has that more sort of rounded feeling that the
way shape your lips
it's
go.
the shape that your lips make. It's sort of the aggressiveness of the aspiration or whatever. Like I'm not a linguist, right? But that's Kiki and Booba. And so she was talking about it in the context of a book where and that's why it's fun, right? It's because it's kind of like a linguist thing. It's like a pop culture linguistics thing. And she was saying that in the book, they kind of handle genders like Kiki and Booba. And I don't even really know what that means, right? But that's really interesting conceptually, right? But anyway, she was talking about it. And she said, oh, by the way, I have a bunch of Kiki and Booba stickers. So find me after the panel. At some point before the end of the convention, I'll give you some. And so she had this thing. It was kind of cool, right? It was... if you are a fan of her, right? It's a fan interaction, I guess. She says, make an effort to find me, bother me, right? Come up to me when I'm hanging out with other people or talking about something else or whatever, and ask me for something, and I'll give it to you. And she was giving it out for free. And so, I asked her and I said, say no if it's if you have a limited number, but is it okay if I have somebody else in mind who I think would like this if I got a second set? And she said, oh yeah, no problem. Take more. I printed them in bulk. So it's, I think, qualitatively a very different type of experience where I think even if somebody was maybe not as popular to the point where they have one of those meet and greet events where there's the pre-signed paid thing, right? You would not find another convention where somebody was saying, hey, find me afterwards and I'll give you free stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Come bother me. I'm asking you to come, and obviously not bother him. I'm using that in a bit of an exaggerated way because obviously she doesn't see it as bothering, right? But she said, come, find me, come interrupt, me at some point in the future and I'll give you something for free. It's like a very different vibe. And I think, part of that is how nice Gretchen is, right? She's I think she's quite a lovely person. But part of that is that even if somebody was really nice, that in other environments, that kindness would be taken advantage of, right? People would monopolize your time, or there would be some difficulty. And even if nobody's doing anything on purpose, in aggregate, right? You can't offer nearly as much of yourself without it to any individual, without it becoming in aggregate a really sort of big pressure on you and your time and energy, right? So it's just cool. Right? Quite cool.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was a good example of sort of compared to your example, right? I think yours really brings into contrast how expensive that stuff is. And, I don't know how popular that artist is. I imagine that he has to be very popular. But, when you think about the different, again, we're talking about differences in medium, right?
Yeah.
How popular an artist even can be versus a actor or
they just reach a bigger audience. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a level, I think, where when you get popular enough and people make demands of your time the same way often enough, then it's no longer interesting. It's no longer fun. It's no longer giving you energy. It takes away energy from you.
Yeah. So this is making me do a bit connect to something else. So this upcoming weekend, I am going to be at a concert in Toronto. It's Bug Hunter and the Narcissist Cookbook. So Bug is a buddy of mine, I think it's fair to say now. And the Narcissist Cookbook is quite a good buddy of Bug's, and is somebody who I've liked Bug Hunter's music for a while, but I haven't listened to a ton of Narcissist Cookbook. And I listened in advance of this, and I've really fallen in love with his music as well. I really, really enjoy it. It's cool and interesting and fun, and he does a lot of really creative stuff with his work. But so what you were talking about, because I want to evoke what I'm trying to talk about before we get too far from the point, right? Because this is a little bit winding, is the idea of when you get popular enough other people take from you to the point that it becomes not as nice, right?
Right.
I don't remember the exact words that you used, but does that feel... that's what you meant, approximately. Where the one point I want to say is that there's a lot of ways in which the types of interactions we have at Scintillation are very they're peer-to-peer, right?
Sure.
Where it's really hard to have an interaction in such a small, intimate spot where the group and social norms are much more that of people hanging out.
Right.
And people who all know Joe. Everybody's kind of pre-vetted, not in a to kick anybody out of the club way, but just in a you wouldn't have a reason to know about it, or you wouldn't have a motivation to go unless somebody brought you in, right? So it is kind of everybody's either pre-vetted through Joe or pre-vetted through somebody close to Joe, and it does create a much more peer-to-peer experience. And so the thing that made me think about a little bit is, so Narcissus Cookbook has his most recent project is something called Myth. It's quite good, but anyways, there's a line in one of his songs where he says that the waves have forgotten they're part of the sea and the sandcastles have forgotten they're part of the beach. And so he has his sort of way of thinking about the world, his sort of most metaphysical, and metaphysical means sort of in opposition to scientific. Metaphysical is something that you can't prove, right? It's a belief that you hold on its own merits. It's a faith-based belief as opposed to an evidence-based belief. That's what metaphysics is, sort of broadly. So
I don't know that. I guess
there's physics and there's metaphysics. That's my understanding of it. Anyways, you can double check that, but that's how it was taught to me, anyways, or how it was taught to me, and I remember it. But so his most metaphysical belief is that people are not fundamentally distinct from each other, that we're part of some larger entity, right? And like in sort of a real and literal sense, that we are all part of something bigger, kind of like the way that like fruiting bodies and mushrooms are connected to each other, and how it's one organism and it's just different outcroppings of it. So you'll see, mushrooms in one, like next to one tree and mushrooms next to another tree, and they can be pretty spread out, and they can seem externally like different things, but they can be part of a much larger network. Like the largest living thing is a big mushroom that's like tons and tons, and like there's like stretches like a kilometer or more or something like that.
I read something about not mushrooms but about trees. Like there's some sort of forest that's all like one organism with all the same root. I can't remember.
I'm not 100% sure about that. We'd have to verify, but so you looked up metaphysics?
On dictionary, it says metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. So the example they gave is that they would regard the question of the initial conditions for universe as belonging to the realm of metaphysics or religion.
Yeah, and they also say abstract theory with no basis in reality.
And the example of that is the very subject of milk pricing involves one in a wonderland of accounting practice and a metaphysics all its own.
Okay, so I would say that my definition was maybe slightly limited, but not altogether inaccurate, right? So it's not just belief, I guess. It can be more stuff than just belief, but it is sort of that like first principles. And when they're talking in philosophy, I think one of the reasons why you have to talk about first principles is because there is always some amount of presupposition that you have to make. Like, for example, it cannot be taken, if you are trying to break down to its barest fundamentals, that any of the sensory input that you're receiving is accurate, right? We know how we're experiencing stuff, but you have to take for granted that there are some ways in which the things that we're experiencing are a complete or accurate representation of the world to base further knowledge on them.
That feels very much like the argument that Descartes used.
Yeah, René Descartes, that's exactly what I was going to say. So, I think, therefore I am.
Right, because that was the only way he was able to actually come up with any kind of argument that he existed, because of the nature of how he perceived stuff. There
is a thing that exists that is experiencing or processing the thoughts that I have.
Right.
Is sort of the most fundamental thing that you could say.
Cogito ergo sum.
Yeah. I don't know if that actually was meant to be the first like a precept that you can make without the use of metaphysics, that you could actually, it could be provable without any like faith or non-scientific
How did
things.
we get here? Where were we?
So I was talking about metaphysical beliefs, that I was saying that the Narcissist Cookbook.
Okay. That's it.
He was talking, the waves have forgotten their part of the sea, and I was talking about how he believes that we are part of one being, right? Okay. And one of the things in the context that I heard him talking about this, it's on YouTube, I believe. It's him talking, it's his like sort of myth Q&A thing that he did after he released both parts of Myth, where he was saying that he felt that, but that playing on stage in front of people, there was being in rooms over and over again where people were looking to him for something and separating him, they were sort of holding him on a pedestal literally and emotionally, was sort of messing with his ability to, on a deeper level, feel and believe that, right? That it is one of his fundamental beliefs, but that his life had been set up in a way that was sort of pushing against his ability to act in accordance with that. And I was going to say that, to bring it back, right, the connection I'm drawing is that I think that when you're in that position where you're very popular, right, I think whether or not you believe that we are all one being, which I think a lot of people probably don't, right? I would say most people probably don't, but I don't have the numbers on it, so I can't say for certain. But there is a certain level of seeing yourself in relation to others as like a peer or as better or different. There's a lot of ways to sort of separate yourself from your perception of other people. And I was saying that I think a lot of cons are set up to build that separation and to really codify and make explicit. There's a system. There's literally the financial success of the individual, and the con depends on how well you can build that barrier up.
So I think that the distinction should be made, though, between commercial cons and fan-run cons. Yeah. Because I think the commercial cons are wanting to capitalize on that as much as possible. And one of the ways to make money is by creating that separation and charging for that difference.
And that's exactly the difference I was saying, is that I think Scintillation in many ways, it like builds that sense of like a much more flat structure, right? Almost on purpose.
It's the best type of fan-run convention that I've ever attended. And part of where you'll see that is the way the programming is done. I've been to conventions where they have 3 or 4 tracks of programming at the same time, and they're relatively small. And this has one main track, one secondary track. There is a time for lunch and dinner where nothing is scheduled. It encourages people to actually eat. Yeah. It encourages people to actually hang out together and eat and do stuff together. So it is mindfully curated by somebody who clearly has a lot of experience with conventions. Yeah. And has a really strong and coherent idea about what kind of programming makes for a good convention.
Yeah, this is one person essentially making the type of convention they want to see. And it turns out that I think
it's a kind of convention I want to see.
Yeah. That, I think different people want different stuff, but that it's a quite lovely experience. And I also think that at the baseline, it being the type of convention somebody wants to see, as opposed to the type of convention that makes the most money, or the type of convention that's like, the easiest to run. Another thing that I think is really wonderful is a lot of the panels come out of conversations that people have had in the interim between each convention, which, it happens every year. So they'll have a convention, they'll have a conversation, they'll go, oh, this would be interesting. Out of the people who normally show up at the conversation or at the convention, I bet this person would have something meaningful to add to this conversation. And let's reach out to Joe and try to get this group together for the panel, right? Where it'll be like most of the people who were there initially, and then depending on the numbers, people, either everyone there who feels like they have something to add, or feels like they have some sort of expertise or chops to have that conversation, and then sometimes some additional people who they feel like would have extra opinions, or they're like, oh, I wish we were having this conversation around this person because they know their stuff, right? And so it is, I think that adds an extra level to it, where I trust the panels a little bit more.
Sure.
Where
you don't need to know everything about what the panel is going to be about, the topic. Like, it almost doesn't matter. It just matters that the people who are there are informed, passionate, and they make it interesting.
Yeah. So that is Scintillation. Do you have any other thoughts? We're talking for almost the whole episode just about how cool this con is. But...
Yeah. Not really. I guess what I should probably do is go to another convention. There's going to be, so in contrast to that, there's going to be Worldcon is probably going to be in Montreal in 2027. Montreal is making a bid for it. So Worldcon goes to different cities every year. Cities will bid on it, or more correctly, committees in each city will put in bids to have the con there.
Yeah.
And right now there's nobody running against Montreal, so it seems like there's a good chance. And Montreal's got a good network of people who have experience running conventions.
Yeah, and it's a nice city. It's got a nice art scene and everything.
So it'll be an interesting contrast because I plan on going, and it's going to be thousands of people instead of less than a couple hundred.
Yeah.
And I should point out that part of the reason why I love Scintillation so much is Restaurant Noodle Factory.
Oh yeah.
So we always call it Noodle Factory, but officially I guess it's Restaurant Noodle Factory. I love eating there. Like, it's the best. To me, it's the best noodle. It's such a great comfort food. And they pull their own noodles.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my endorsement of Scintillation.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. And then also I spent some time in Singapore and Japan. Just like 2.5 weeks. Nothing. Not too much to talk about there.
That's too 2 episodes right there.
Not too much that we can bounce off of each other.
No, yeah, because I didn't go.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of being in a place where you could go to a different ramen restaurant every day for like years without having to repeat yourself.
Yeah. And so, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that in a future week, but I think we probably had enough here. And then the further we are, the more distance we have, I'll have narrowed it down to just the stuff that I think is really worth talking about. I've forgotten a lot of the less important details that feel more important at the time, and then the further out you get, they're the stuff that goes away, and you go, you kind of whittle it down to the core.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to do maybe one question?
Well, first comment and maybe one question.
Okay. So this one comes from Abhinav Dutta, V3H. They say, works on version 3.5.1, updated in April 2025. And this was just a comment on the challenge reset video.
So the reason why I like this comment is that there's a limited... When you interact with media, there's often a limited way that you can sort of contribute, right? Like, everybody says that when you read something, part of your interpretation is what you bring to the reading. But that's still so much very personal. And a lot of times that will have no impact on the author besides the sale, I guess. But what I love about these kind of comments is that they are doing exactly what we're doing. They're trying to help out other viewers by confirming that it works. I mean, we've had a few requests, I think, recently for redoing some of the videos.
Yeah.
And I can see the point if people are struggling, or they're having difficulty with it, but I think all the information is actually there and it still works is sort of the most important thing. And it's nice that even though it's a video that's, I don't know, like 6-7 years old now, that people are still finding it, getting help from it. And this is the important part with this comment. Thank you, Abhinav. That you're willing to make your own contribution by letting people know that it still works.
Well, it's nice. It's one of those little things where you are getting something out of it. You are like, oh, I wonder if this still works. And then when you answer that question for yourself, you are doing some amount of effort into making it easier for the people who come after you, which I think, this is obviously, I think, a relatively small thing, right? It's not a massive amount of work. There's not a huge sort of barrier to entry for doing it. But I think it's the fact that you don't see a lot of stuff like this where we've talked before at length, I think, about pro-social behavior in the internet and how a lot of the internet is not really set up to have us interact with each other in ways that are healthy and good. And so it's cool to sort of, wherever possible, encourage any amount of healthy and good interaction, right? And it's a good reminder to ourselves, too, because there's a lot of stuff where, most of the time I'm spending on the internet, I'm looking to get something out of it. Right, I'm not necessarily looking to contribute to anybody else's experience of it, with, I guess, the small exception being these videos, right? Where even so, I think I still get more out of it than I'm concerned with giving to other people, right? I'm happy when I do, but that's more sort of coincidental than...
intentional?
then my focus. I would say
Right.
there's an amount of intentionality to it, but it's like not my top priority. And I don't think it's like a necessary precursor set. Like, oh,
Right.
I need somebody to be getting something out of this in order for this to be something that I want to do, right? Which is why it's a good hobby, right?
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for a few years. It's still pretty fun.
So our next comment comes from YEITS. So Yates Thomas, maybe? I'm not 100% sure. And they say, I was wondering if you guys would ever do a video on current characters that are only obtainable through pay to win things like real money, or really just scarce characters. The video can include people like Dawn of Justice, Arkham Knight Batman, AO Deathstroke.
Yeah, Arkham Origins Deathstroke.
Yeah. Etc. That would be really cool, just to compile all the characters right now that are only available through paywall.
So there's a few layers here to unpack, actually. So there's some characters that are only available through paywall if it's your first character. But I think there's a lot of characters that once you've got your first copy, they're actually available in other ways, but very rare.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to actually point out first here is that this actually strikes me as quite a good idea for a video. I say that in terms of not necessarily something that I would be really motivated to make necessarily, right? We might, but when I think about a video that has sort of a pull, something that you can imagine, oh, what would you title the video? What would the draw for people to watch it be, right? When you think about within the scope of what we make and what is reasonable for us to make, I think that's actually a really good idea for the type of content creator that we are. So I think that's it's a fun suggestion, and I think there's an amount of savviness or understanding of what people want to see, and maybe it's just because it's literally what you want to see. Right. But I think in terms of like quality of actual idea, right? A lot of people are just telling us exactly what they would like to see as a video. I think this is actually specifically kind of a good idea, and I wanna point that out.
So I think it becomes more, when you talk about it like that, then maybe it's a more of a marketing issue for us that we're not very good at it, because all the characters that are mentioned, I believe we used a bunch of them. We used maybe all of them on our season of our favorite teams, which was the season before the last one, so maybe season 12. And here's the fundamental problem with a lot of content. There's so much content out there. Part of it is finding your audience, and maybe if we'd pushed it a little differently, maybe more people would be watching. But sadly enough, because it happened during our Q&A videos, there's not a lot of views, and clearly that's on us.
Well, absolutely. If it was packaged differently, if we said, here's all the characters that you can't get, right? If we did a clickbait title, right? Like, these characters aren't available anymore, right? We bet you're missing at least one, right? And then we did a showcase and we went through them, and then, you could even organize it into sort of a list sort of thing based off of how easy or hard it was, right?
People love lists.
Your distinction, for example, right, of people that you only need one copy of, right? And then it could be potentially information for people where it's all the stuff all the characters that you can't get, and maybe we say the ones that you could get if you just buy them once, right? Versus the ones that you need to get all of them, right? Like that. I think if you have sort of a sense of how to package that as content, I think it's actually something that it is probably easy to package as content, and probably would be more successful than our average piece of content by a decent margin. I think if anybody is still sort of seeing our stuff and then making the decision to click on it or not based off of what it looks like, I think that's actually that's a totally content ready thing.
So the problem really is, like you said, finding the motivation, finding the time, getting to do it on top of all the other stuff. I think there's been times where it's been a struggle to even continue doing what we're doing now, and I'm not sure what the solution is. I think maybe once I retire, I could find the time, but I feel like there's so many things that are waiting. I have probably hundreds of books that I could read. And if I started now, I probably would die before I finished all of them.
It's true. Well, because the backlog just keeps getting bigger. The problem is that people keep making new stuff that's worth consuming. But I think what this channel initially was a lot more of an information product, right? Where we just wanted to, where we thought that there was a missing place in sort of Injustice, and specifically that missing piece was there was not good instructional content for how to do glitches. There was written stuff, but it was not great, and that you could put effort and research into it and make it visual, and videos were specifically qualitatively better, more useful than anything that existed. And so that's what we did. And now I think it's become almost entirely a sort of hobby product where the goal is to get the most personal enjoyment out of it with some amount of structure to make sure that we keep doing it, where it really is mostly an excuse for us to hang out.
Well, the Q&A is.
Yeah.
But I think the weekly recap still holds true to the roots of informational kind of...
Yeah.
With a flavor of opinion when we talk about the challenge characters and what they're good for.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. But on the balance, right? I think so it's not all the way over, but it's maybe shifted from like 100% or like 80% one thing to 80% of the other thing, maybe.
Yeah.
But so this is an interesting idea for a piece of content. I can't say that we will make it.
I can't say we won't. Like there's been other times where people have come up with ideas and we told them, hey, it just doesn't fit our life. It's not going to happen. And it was true at the time. And then our circumstances changed. And then stuff happened. Like our recaps are now on Thursdays. I think they used to be earlier in the week because that's when we had time.
And then somebody said, hey, you could move them. And then we're like,
or you could do it. It'd be more useful if you did it on a different day. And it's because once my work schedule changed, then it allowed us to
they were right, and then we were able to, and then we did. Yeah. So I would say that there's no guarantee that this could happen, but in terms of, I was wondering if you guys could do it. I think that's a good thing to wonder, and it's cool. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Right. I do think that this is a good idea. I think if you're asking a more professional or motivated set of YouTubers, that they would see that and say, oh, that is a gap in our content strategy, and that if we were smarter or again, I think more motivated, if we wanted this to be something different than what it is for us, I think that's actually a great idea. Yeah. So there we go. I think that's a relatively positive way to end things off.
Nice.
So to finish up, we'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our lovely patrons on Patreon. Talk about not being professional YouTubers, but there are people out there who see exactly what we make and go, yeah, I'll give these people a couple bucks, and we are surprised and appreciative, and we just think it's really neat. So this is a real honest thank you to Michael Devries, Irvin, Ruiz, Hoshi 127, Nora Klimek, and Miguel, who are supporting us on the credited level. And we'd also like to have some genuine gratitude. I mean, we say also this is mostly for us and, hanging out and the value that we get out of it. But it's really cool that there are people who listen along and like this and engage with us, right? Like there's something that feels really nice about that. And so we are, a lot of the value that we're getting out of it is influenced and enhanced by having viewers like we do who seem on the balance like cool, kind people, which is nice. So we'd like to give a huge thank you to all of you as well. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.